This relationship between depth and size was systematically observed in a study in what is now a classic study by Holloway and Boring back in 1941, where an observer is sitting at the intersection of two hallways, and on the right they're going to have a test circle, where the test circle is going to be at different distances away from the viewer, and it's always going to take up 1 degree of visual angle. As we've been saying, if something is smaller and closer, it's going to take up a degree of visual angle, and as we move farther away, if we're going to keep taking up that 1 degree of visual angle, we have to make that larger. So the viewing distance changes between 10 to 120 feet. The test circle always takes up 1 degree of visual angle, and so it's getting larger as it's moving away from the person. And on the left side is a comparison circle where the viewing distance is always 10 feet away. And there, the participants are adjusting the size of that comparison circle to make it equal to the test circle. In free viewing, the participants are receiving then a number of depth cues, binocular depth cues, in addition to motion parallax as they're moving their eyes back and forth and their head back and forth, as well as there is shadows or shading. They also had, so they manipulated these conditions so that they would also put them in a monocular condition, so taking away that binocular disparity information, so just closing one eye. They would have them look through a peephole in another condition. So I'm using one eye to look through a peephole, and I'm taking away, or they took away, that motion parallax information. And then there's finally the monocular peephole with drapes. So now taking away binocular cues, taking away motion parallax, and taking away shadows and shading information. So again, what the participants are doing is they are adjusting that size of the comparison circle to match their perception of the size of the test circle, right? They're estimating the size of the test circle and trying to get those to match. And as you can see, in the normal and in the monocular conditions, so when I have my binocular cues, and even if I'm just using one eye, if I have motion parallax and shadows and shading, it looks like I'm seeing that test circle appropriately, and that it is getting larger as it's moving away, and I can see the distance. And so we maintain this kind of size constancy and match the test circle relatively well. But they go in and take away the motion parallax with the peephole. They go in and they take away motion parallax and shadows or shading, and you can tell now it's like I'm in the whiteout condition. I can't tell what size things are or how the distance of what things are, and so I've lost the size, and I'm basically just using visual angle to estimate size. I'm going to end this by not talking about all of the different size illusions. If you're really into this kind of stuff and you read it and you have questions, please ask me. It's been a long time since I've talked about all the different size illusions. They give you a bunch, and they are neat, and there are a few that work differently in different cultures because of how we are used to drawing art pictures and seeing art and all of this. But so in this picture, one of the things they're showing is this really, do you want to call it loss of size constancy? That the cues are leading us towards one direction, where in the left example, it looks like she's handing this bottle to a teeny tiny man on a chair, but we take away some of those cues that are suggesting, and get this, so this chair is actually in front of him, right? And he's back farther away, and when we take away some of that information that is strongly suggesting that he's close to us, it turns out he's farther away and he's not shrinking into this little tiny man anymore. Although if you take your fingers back and forth, you can see that he is the exact same size in both of those examples. Trust me, he's the exact same size, but we can just see the depth better in the example in B. And I have a couple more of these. So this is a great example of size constancy, and coming back to this concept of having perceptual constancies, which we talked about now with phonemes, that we perceive those as constants, even though allophones are widely variable because of different articulations, because of different contexts and different speakers and all of that. But we also talked about this with color, that we have color constancy, and I didn't go into it as much with shape, which is unfortunate, but I think I do here in a minute. So we also have this size constancy, where if I ask you to estimate the size of the man in white who is farther up on the hiking trail, most people say, I mean, is he the same size or close to the size of the woman and the girl next to her? Probably. And most of us, because we have this estimation that guys are probably bigger, he's probably a little bit bigger. But let's take that specific picture and pull it. So look down at their feet. So this is actually from Dr. Mark Berman, who had me do a talk for him one time, and he had some of this stuff set up. And he had this great animation of pulling that guy out in the size that he's in and putting him up in the front. And now he's tiny, just how we kind of saw that tiny man before, except this one's been physically pulled into the front. But that's not how we perceive him, right? We've applied all these depth cues and the fact that he's farther away to say, yeah, he's probably about the same size as them, even though he's much smaller on the retina. And so part of Dr. Berman's point to talk about these constancies is really, and it comes back, I think, nicely full circle now that I end on depth perception sometimes, where the proximal stimulus, what's on the retina, does not really correspond to the distal stimulus, what's in the environment. If you remember, the distal stimulus is causing this proximal stimulus on the receptors themselves, and it's changed, it's transformed. We talk about this principle of transformation and representation. We're not resembling, right? We're representing, but our perceptual experience is corresponding very nicely to the distal stimulus. And again, we do get illusions at times, but in this case, our visual system does what it needs to. It maintains that size constancy. Those people are about the same size, even though he's farther away, and we don't see this proximal, where these images are not the same size on the retina. We don't see him as being tiny. We take into account that depth information so that our representation is back to more closely matching what's out in the world, that these people are the same size. All right, that's a perfect place to end. We're almost right at 20 minutes, and it's a perfect place for me to end my videos and my slides here. I will say, again, there are lots of kind of fun illusions to walk through and think through with depth and size, because it does go awry at times. And if you have questions about those, give me a warning. I'll look back into them. It's been a long time since I've talked about them, but they are fun and fascinating.